diplomacy actually matters more than ever as a tool of first resort. When we were the dominant player in the world, as we were, up until a decade or so ago, our power and influence unquestioned in many respects. Diplomacy, actually, you could get away with diplomacy being an afterthought. But on this landscape, when success, I think, is all about investing in alliances, what sets us apart from lonelier powers like China or Russia, and mobilizing coalitions of countries, whether it's to deal with a challenge to regional order or it's to deal with a big global challenge like climate change or technology, that use of diplomacy as our tool of first resort really does become more important than ever. So the rebuilding task that I think our country will face, as you look out, beyond the Trump era, is going to be an enormous one. And I'll start with the traditional, which is sort of the core skills of diplomats, because I think we've lost our way a little bit over the last 35 years or so, in the sense that in the period after the end of the Cold War, there was a sense that, again, because we were the dominant player in the world, we didn't need to worry so much about government-to-government relations and the kind of things that really are at the core of what diplomacy is all about. It's not only about relations between governments, it's also about connections to societies. But if you don't do that core role properly, managing relations between governments, cajoling, pressuring, encouraging political leaders to make decisions that suit American interests and that they see to be consistent with their own interests. If you don't do that right, then all the rest of the stuff you do in terms of building connections to societies doesn't matter as much. If you do that right, then you can build all sorts of other things on that foundation. Because it's about managing human relationships, it's about navigating other societies in pursuit of your country's interests, but understanding what makes other people tick and how best to make an argument, and then how best to explain that society and all of its challenges and difficulties, to your own decision makers in Washington. So first point is getting those core skills right. Both George Kennan, the famous American diplomat and the architect of the containment doctrine, and then later George Shultz, when he was Secretary of State early in my career, used to talk about diplomats as gardeners. The theory being that you're constantly engaged in the process on the international landscape of trying to prune and, nurture plants that you think have promise and, get rid of weeds and everything else. But we need to do a fair amount of weeding of our own garden in the state.